Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we diving into this time?
Today, we're going deep on something we all do, or at least should be doing, and that is ministering.
Ministering. Sounds pretty churchy. What do you mean by that?
Well, we're focusing on how one faith tradition sees it, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And trust me, it's way more personal than you might think. We're talking one-on-one connections, heartfelt support, real people making a real difference in each other's lives.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Where are we getting all this juicy info from?
From a message called Fittingly Ministering that was shared at their big general conference back in April 2023. We're going to unpack some pretty incredible stories, and hopefully you'll walk away with some nuggets of wisdom you can apply to your own life, whether you're religious or not.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get into it.
All right, so the message starts off strong with some real-life examples, like the story of Gilly and Mary over in England. Gilly, a longtime member, opens up her home to Mary, who's brand new to the church.
That's so sweet. Just a simple gesture, but, it really speaks volumes.
Exactly. It's like saying, "Welcome, we're so glad you're here," without actually having to say a word.
Right. Sometimes actions speak louder than words, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But did this one gesture really impact Mary's life? Like, did it make a difference in the grand scheme of things?
Oh, it totally did. It made her feel like she belonged, which, let's be honest, is huge when you're new to any community, right? Feeling like you fit in, like you matter.
100%. It's about those connections.
Totally. And then there's the story of Jeff, former baseball player turned doctor. What a curveball.
Okay, now that's a career shift. Hold on. What does a baseball player turned doctor have to do with ministering? Did his practice become like a ministry or something?
Not quite. Okay, so in this faith tradition, they have this system where members are assigned to look out for each other, support each other. They call it having a ministering brother or a ministering sister.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Kind of like a buddy system, but with a spiritual focus.
Exactly. So Jeff's ministering brother was basically his point person, his friend within the church community.
Gotcha. So how did that lead him to baptism? Was it like constant preaching or?
No, not at all. See, at first, Jeff wasn't into the whole church thing, at all.
Yeah.
But his ministering brother, this friend, just kept showing up. Not in a pushy way, just genuinely being there. They bonded over common interests, offered support during rough patches, that kind of thing.
It's amazing how those seemingly small acts of kindness, especially when they're consistent, can add up to something really impactful.
It really is. And, that's ultimately what led Jeff to want to learn more about the church. And eventually he decided to get baptized.
Wow. But building that kind of trust, that takes time, right? It's not an overnight thing.
You're telling me. And that's where John and Peggy's story comes in, talk about playing the long game.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. What happened? Tell me everything.
So for over a decade, like a whole decade, John's ministering brother never gave up on him.
Wait, seriously? A decade?
Yeah. Even when it seemed like, John wasn't interested. They'd visit, chat a bit, but nothing seemed to come of it.
Wow. That's some serious dedication. I mean, I'd probably call it quits after like a year, tops.
Yeah.
It'd be so easy to assume he just wasn't interested.
Right. But his ministering brother never did. And guess what? It made all the difference. That consistency, that quiet offering of friendship, it created this foundation of trust that eventually led John to explore the church on his own terms, and eventually he got baptized later in life, found real joy in it.
That's incredible. It really speaks to the power of just being present for someone without judgment or expectations, just showing up. But it can't always be easy, right? Like being there for people, especially when they're going through tough times.
Oh, for sure not. And Meb and Jenny's story is a perfect example of that.
Oh,
They were
wow.
in the middle of some serious marriage problems.
Oof. Yeah, that's rough. It's already hard enough to ask for help, let alone when it's something that personal.
You can say that again. Which is why having a supportive community is so important. And this faith tradition really encourages couples to, try to work things out to find spiritual solutions within the context of their marriage.
So did it work out for Meb and Jenny? Did they manage to work through their issues?
Well, they did seek guidance from their religious leaders, relied on their community for support, which is exactly what their faith encourages.
That takes guts to be so vulnerable, especially about something as personal as marriage.
Absolutely. But they weren't alone in this. Their entire community rallied around them, offering both practical help and emotional support.
I love that. A collective embrace of compassion. It's like the safety net, catching people when they fall. But is there ever a point where it's too much? Like, what if there are more people giving than receiving?
That's such a good question, and the message actually addresses that directly. They call it the ministering gap.
The ministering gap. Okay, now I need to hear more. What exactly does that mean?
So picture this. You've got this community where everybody's all about giving, helping others, right?
Yeah.
But nobody wants to admit they need help themselves.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like everyone's offering a hand, but no one's willing to grab it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the gap.
But why does that happen? Like, why wouldn't people accept help when it's offered?
Sometimes it's just, I don't know, cultural. People feel like they have to be strong, self-sufficient. They don't want to burden anyone.
Especially in a community where the focus is on service. It's almost like admitting you need help would be, I don't know, shameful.
Yeah, there might be a bit of that going on.
It's a weird paradox, right? Like wanting to serve others so much that you end up preventing them from receiving care. So how do we, I don't know, bridge that gap? How do you create a culture where it's okay to both give and receive?
Well, the message suggests starting by going beyond those surface level interactions. It's not enough to just ask, how are you, and expect a fine back. You got to create a space for real connection, vulnerability.
Right. It's about going deeper. But how do you even start that kind of conversation? It can be kind of awkward,
Totally. The message talks about meaningful invitations. Like instead of just saying, we should get together sometime, try something more specific, like, hey, I'd love to hear more about that project you're working on, or what are you passionate about these days?
Ooh, yeah, I like that. It shows you're genuinely interested, not just going through the motions.
Exactly. But the message also uses this, I don't know, kind of interesting analogy to describe this whole supportive community thing.
Oh, yeah, the vineyard one.
That's the one. They compare the church to, like, an ecosystem, and each person is a tree in the vineyard.
Okay, I'll admit, at first I was like, huh. But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
Right. So walk with me here. Vineyard. Rows of trees, all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
How does that connect to ministering?
Okay, so each tree, each person has their own strengths and weaknesses, right? Some are strong, some need a little more support.
Exactly. So ministering becomes like tending to those trees. You're supporting the ones that need it, recognizing the unique value each one brings.
Oh, I see it. It's like even the little trees, even the ones that seem weak, they contribute to the whole.
And the vineyard can't thrive without all of them.
It's that whole rising tide lifts all boats idea.
Totally. We all do better when we work together, support each other's growth. But it's not just about being a good friend, right? There's a deeper spiritual side to it, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's about more than just good deeds.
It's about, at its core, reflecting Christ's love, trying to see each other the way he does, with compassion and empathy. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, now you have to tell me more. What makes this connection to Christ so fascinating?
Well, it's the idea that serving others, especially those who are struggling, brings us closer to the divine. Not about earning points or anything, but about connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
Seeing that divine spark in everyone, no matter what.
Yes. And, a message also talks about ministering to the ministers, which I thought was really interesting.
It's like a whole other level of compassion, taking care of the caregivers.
Right. It's about recognizing that even the people who give care, they need it too. They need support, encouragement, the space to be vulnerable.
It's like that thing they tell you on airplanes about putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. So it's about preventing burnout, fostering this culture of compassion where everyone feels supported, seen, valued.
Exactly. A positive feedback loop of compassion.
I love it. But honestly, it sounds like a lot of work. How does someone actually do this in everyday life?
Well, the message does get practical. Like, it talks about the importance of consistency.
Consistency, like just showing up regularly.
Yeah, even when it's inconvenient. It's not about grand gestures, more about the little things.
Okay, so being consistent makes sense, but it's more than just showing up with a casserole, right?
Yeah.
What else is there?
Oh, for sure. It's about being intentional, making sure your actions match your words. Remember that story about the sister in Boston? The one who wouldn't open her door unless she saw the temple recommends of the people visiting.
Oh, yeah. That one was
Yeah.
something else. For those who don't know, temple recommends are like, I don't know how to explain it, like VIP passes. Show you're living a certain way, following the rules, that sort of thing.
It's a big deal for them. And while the message clarifies that having a temple recommend isn't necessary for ministering, that story shows how important it is to be sincere, genuine. Be yourself, flaws and all.
No more hiding behind those perfect facades. Be real.
Exactly. But that takes guts, doesn't it? Being that open, that vulnerable.
It does. To admit that you don't have it all figured out, it's scary.
It is. And the message gets that. Ministering isn't always easy, especially when you're dealing with tough situations.
So how do you stay strong, especially when you're feeling drained yourself?
That's where the spiritual side comes back in. The message talks about relying on your faith, seeking guidance when you feel lost. You're not in this alone, you know.
It's about tapping into something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. But how does all of this actually play out? Like, what are the real life results? Well, it's like you change, but the people you're trying to help, they change too. Remember John, the one who wasn't into the church for, like, forever.
Yeah. A decade of saying no thanks.
Right. But then, after his friend ministered to him so patiently, he finally got baptized. And it wasn't just going through the motions. It transformed his life. He found so much joy in it.
It's like that saying, good things come to those who wait. Except in this case, it's more like, good things come to those who are ministered to, and to those who minister.
Exactly. It changes everyone involved. Like Gandhi said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
Ooh, I like that. It's so true, though. When you're focused on helping others, you kind of forget about your own problems, you know?
For sure. And you start seeing the world differently.
You really do. You start noticing things you never would have before, and suddenly you're more connected to the people around you. It's less about checking things off a to-do list and more about, I don't know, becoming a better person.
Yes. And even when it's hard, you know, when you feel like you're not making a difference.
Which happens. It's not always sunshine and roses, right?
Right. But even then, knowing that someone notices your efforts, that they're appreciated.
That's huge. It doesn't even have to be some big public recognition. Just that quiet feeling that you're doing something worthwhile.
Totally. And the message even quotes scripture on this. God loveth a cheerful giver. It's not about forcing it, you know. It's about wanting to do good, finding joy in it.
Speaking of joy, this deep dive has been seriously eye-opening.
Right. Who knew we'd uncover so much about compassion and connection?
I know. And you know what's funny? You don't have to be part of any particular faith to appreciate these principles.
Not at all. It's about tapping into something universal, you know.
Exactly. That desire to connect, to support each other, to just make the world a little bit brighter. We can all do that. We can all be ministering brothers and sisters in our own way.
Absolutely.
So as you go about your week, dear listeners, I challenge you. Look for those little opportunities. Those moments where you can show up for someone, offer a listening ear, a helping hand, a genuine smile. You never know. That small act of kindness, that moment of connection, it just might make all the difference in the world. Until next time, happy exploring.